Welcome back to another episode of the Dyslexic Maverick podcast. Today we have Kristen, also known as the Mindfully Mended Mama on social media. We talk with Kristen about her learning about her ADHD diagnosis and really exploring what that looked like for her in each season of life that she's kind of progressing through and understanding more about her brain. We talk a little bit about dyslexia and how a professor actually brought that to her attention in college and naming brains and how important it is to really get the right vocabulary to express our brain types and how that can actually benefit us. And we also talk about ADHD and burnout, which I think is something that we need to be talking about more. She does a great job of explaining how it feels and looks for her, and then some ways that she's been able to work through it as well. So if that's a season that you're in, definitely listen and hopefully this helps. So I'm excited. I can't wait for you to listen to this episode. So let's jump right in. I love your content. I think it's so relatable. Um, Mindfully Mended Mama is your Instagram handle, right? Can you just tell me a little bit about how you came up with that name?
Yeah, I we had a crazy 2020. It was I mean everybody did. But there was just a ton of stuff that was happening and we ended up getting relocated for my husband's job. There was a lot of grief situations happening in our lives, and we moved away from a community that I had built. I had my parents, and we were close to my husband's parents, and they moved us to Arkansas in the height of the pandemic around like June 2020, and we knew one family that was there, but they didn't live like super close to us. So it was like we were flying blind. We even bought the house without actually like I had never stepped foot in it. It was absolutely insane.
I hear
Um,
about people doing that, and I can't even imagine.
It was insane. My realtor was phenomenal. She was like getting down on the floor and like showing us. It was insane. But in that season, we I realized that I was having a ton of trouble like coping and dealing with grief and dealing with I had two kids under two at that point, and my youngest had just turned one, and I was just I had never like heard of I mean, for me, I had been diagnosed with anxiety in like high school and college. And I had a couple little weird things in college where like I wish someone would have been like, here you go. But I finally went to a therapist, and he was like, do you have any familial ties to ADHD? And I was like, yeah, my older brother has it. And he goes, oh, well, you tested like off the charts for it, and like here's your results. And I was like, I like laughed at him. I was like, no, 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 that's not a thing. I have anxiety. And he goes, well, yeah, that's a part of it. I was like, well, super. I'm glad I'm 30 and just finding out about this. But through that, one of the things in therapy is dealing with the diagnosis and dealing with all of the things that we were dealing with in that time. My therapist encouraged me to start writing because I love writing, and it was a way to kind of like get it all out. And through that, I started a blog, and I started posting all of these things in my like brain dumps on my blog. And then, because everybody and their brother joined TikTok in 2020, because what else were we going to do? I started sharing. I started sharing on TikTok, and it was, I found other people, but I was trying to figure out like a way to. I wanted to talk about the fact that I was a mom. Um, I wanted to talk about my mental health, and I wanted to encapsulate everything. So the mindfully and the mended was being aware and accepting who I am and everything that makes me me, and the fact that I am constantly being mended. I'm constantly learning and growing and bettering myself. So I'm, scooping up all my broken pieces and, giving them over to the Lord and having him mend me. And then I am a mom. So it just kind of it came out of a journaling time of like I just wanted to be really mindful of who I was and who I was becoming in that season of life, and I just kind of journaled it and it came out.
So interesting that you say journaling because I was literally talking with a friend yesterday who's going through some things. And I thought, and I said this, I said literally, and she has ADHD as well. I said, I don't know why this is coming onto my heart, but I feel like I have to share it with you. I feel like you, she is a brilliant writer. And I said, I think you really need to like embrace that again and start
Yeah.
journaling to get
Yep.
out these feelings. And so it's like I get these, like, goosebumps when you're saying this because 'cause I'm like, "Yes, like, there was something there." And she's like, "Yes, I used to do that, and I probably" and I'm like, "Not for the world to see, just as a way to process emotions or thoughts." That's so interesting. So do you and I'm picturing listeners thinking like, "Oh, maybe that would be a good way for me to help kind of process ADHD."
Mhm.
Can you walk through, like, for somebody who doesn't journal, I don't
Mhm.
like, I don't know that, like, I know what that looks like, and I'm sure it's not as complicated as maybe I'm making it seem, but
But I think for me, putting pen on paper is very cathartic for me because of the fact that I am so easily distracted, obviously, and I am doing 20 things at once. So, like, taking the time to find, like, to just brain dump everything, and it doesn't have to make sense. I think that's for me, that has been a journey even in my journaling is I always think it has to look pretty or sound pretty or, look structured. And it just, the more that I have just, gotten it all out, it's been a very, very cathartic thing for me. Now obviously there are days where I like start and I'm like, I can't even focus enough to like get any thoughts on a paper. But especially, going through grief and going through, different things where you really need to process things, like a lot of that is like getting all of the ugly, all of the things that you kind of store in here on a piece of paper is very, very cathartic for me.
is there a favorite, like, time of day or, like, kind of like a ritual that you do that, like, makes journaling kind of like an experience for you?
Um, I would love to say, and I have said this to my therapist multiple times, is like, I have always wanted to be the like get up in the morning and go for a run and like to get a shower and like get all ready and then sit with my cup of coffee that's like steaming and like that's just not who I am. Like, and I've wanted to be that my entire life, and I've actually tried multiple times to like have that schedule. And I do have, in order to survive, being a mom and having ADHD and all the things, I do have to have some sort of structure. But it there is no schedule. It's just, a lot of times I have a spot. I am in my egg chair and it's my favorite spot in my house. And um, that's where I will, brain dump and do that. But
Yeah, and I love that, right? Like, it doesn't have to be, like, get up and go for a run and, like, all of these things that we think we should be doing.
oh, I always think I should. Yep. I have such high expectations of like, I don't know where I came up with that of like wanting to be this like, this mother who like has everything cleaned by 6 a.m. And, and it is so far from who I am. And I just had to accept that.
I don't even know if that mom exists, and if that mom does exist, she's probably not happy.
And she's probably exhausted.
Yeah, she's really tired and probably needs, like, way more coffee, um, and probably a good cry, to be honest with
Absolutely.
you. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I think sometimes we, like, look at the other moms in car lines or at pickup, and we're like, "How do they have it all together and I don't?" And I feel like we just all need to say, "None of us have our shit together."
Absolutely.
Like,
Absolutely.
we're yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
that's awesome. And I feel like that's your Instagram is very much that way, right? Like, it is not, like, this perfect world that you, like,
Oh,
live in, like,
absolutely not.
you're very real about the content that you share, which I so appreciate.
And that, even that has had to become a process because, growing up, I was a perfectionist and I still technically am. I've just showed myself a little bit more grace becoming a mom. And I had this perfect vision when I became a parent of like, or before I became a mom of like, everything's going to be tidy and everything, I know that I was messy, but like, I just really felt like I was going to, be this, not, I never had expectations of being perfect, but it was like, I just had this vision of motherhood that was, everything was put away at night and it was like calm and peaceful and I really wanted that to be the case and I struggled so badly even through the diagnosis of ADHD and walking through like this is who I am and it's okay that my house isn't perfect and that we just got back from vacation and my kitchen is an absolute disaster and there's things out and it's okay to just be like, you know what? In this season of life, this is okay.
Absolutely. And I did see that you just got back from New York.
We did.
What were you there for? Like,
My cousin got married in Saratoga. Yeah, so all of my a lot of my extended family live in Saratoga, so we were up there celebrating them, and it was gorgeous. It was on the horse tracks, and it was absolutely phenomenal. And she was breathtaking, and it was incredible. So it was so
that's
fun.
awesome. Was it also an ADHD reunion with family members? Do you look at it differently now that you know?
Not a lot of the adults in the family have been diagnosed with anything, but there are a couple cousins that we have, shared secret, jokes and laughs about, who we think is the ones that passed it down to us.
Yes, yes, yeah. It's funny, I think sometimes, like, we're sitting around the dinner table with, like, extended family, and somebody will do something or say something, and I'll, like, give a side eye to, like, somebody, like, that's total ADHD moment. They don't know it yet, but it's cute.
Well, I was even they had like a cocktail hour and I was sitting next to my mom and dad and I looked at my dad and the I laughed so hard. The waiter came to like take his drink and he was sitting like swirling the ice in the bottom of it and like playing with it and the waiter was like, "Can I take your drink?" And he goes, "You know what? I think I'm just going to like can I keep it and play with it? I'm not done like playing with it." And I like looked at my dad and I was like, "Dad?" He's like sitting there like stimming. He doesn't know that it's stimming and like doing all of these and like fidgeting. And I'm like, "Dad, do you know what you're doing?" He was like, "What?" And I was like, you're fidgeting, you're stimming. You didn't it's very overwhelming and loud in here. And you're co-regulating yourself. You don't realize you're doing that. And he was like, "Oh, I guess I am." Like, it was just really funny.
It's so funny how different generations, like, we say stimming or masking or fidgeting, and they're like, "Oh, those kids, they need a fidget." And it's like, "Well, no, we all have fidget."
No, you do things. You just don't realize you're doing it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, whether it's clicking a pen or picking at your fingers, like, there are so many things that yeah, that we all do, we just don't call it the same thing. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. So I would love to know, um, you are a vocal instructor by
Mhm.
like, is that or do you still actively teach or
I I graduated with a vocal degree and then I came back to Cincinnati to take care of my mom and I just kind of stayed and I started my own vocal studio with elementary to high school kids teaching private voice lessons. So they would come in and I would teach them how to sing, how to use like the physicality of your voice and all of that kind of stuff. So, but then when I had kids, it became a little overwhelming to have two kids and try to teach at the same time. So I then transitioned into music directing. So now I go into the local middle school and high schools and I teach theater or singing for theater. So I will go in and I'll teach all the music for the shows.
at least how I'm picturing it's more like project based, so it's like for a specific show, which kind of maybe works well for your brain?
It's I always say that it's the perfect for me. It's the perfect job for me because it gets me out and I can take my mom hat off and I can be immersed in teaching. And I love working with students. I love being creative with younger students and seeing how their brains work and seeing how they operate. And music is a very good way to bring that out of any student. So it's been super rewarding and the hours are really flexible and I can, be a part of it, and it's a way to get my feet wet without having to do something full time.
I feel like our ADHD neurospicy family always has music going on, like, whether it's in our heads or it's actually out loud into the world. I feel like and not necessarily we're good singers, but we just are always we always have something, like a beat or a song or something playing, and
It's a very good co-regulating thing and or a even self-regulating thing, and I didn't think about it until later in life where I was like, "Oh, that's super helpful to, like, help calm my brain down." So it's just funny the way life works out.
so interesting. I'm thinking about my 10-year-old who's always singing, like, always, and he is probably struggles with ADHD the most. We're all dyslexic, as well, but ADHD is really his challenge, and I bet it is that coping skill of just trying to quiet his brain down through singing. So fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. That, like, just, like, put those
Absolutely.
puzzle pieces together for me. I love that.
But you know what's funny is, I went to college for music, and I had studied music theory and I had done all of, the really intense music theory before I even went to college. But I was halfway through my junior year and I was taking a music theory final. And my professor brought like, I turned the test in and I got an email and he was like, "Hey, I want you to come to my office." And I was like, "Oh crap, what did I do?" And there was like two things that he mentioned, and this was like one of the first like little spoonfuls of like, your brain is different. Um, he like handed the test back to me, and he goes, "First of all, did you mean to leave the entire back of the test blank?" And I was like, "No, no, I did not." And he said, if you are okay with this, I would really like to watch you take it." And I was like, "Okay." I was so taken aback by it. I was like, "This is so awkward." And I'm thinking, he's gonna see that I don't know what I'm doing, and oh my gosh, and he's gonna watch me fail in front of him. And like my fear of failure was like, ding, 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 ding. I was like, "Oh my gosh, it's the worst thing ever." And I'm sitting there like, nervous. And he goes, "Can I just ask you? I'm gonna just take this with you." And he was like, "Why did you say that this was the chord that you said?" And I like walked him through it. He was like, "Has anybody ever talked to you about dyslexia?" I was like, "No." He was like, "Do you have, like, trouble reading?" I was like, "I mean, I have to read if I'm not super interested in it, I have to read it, like, 10 a page, like, 10 times, and it's super hard, it takes me a really long time." And he was like, "Huh, hmm, you're flipping you're flipping the notes on the staff." I was like, "What?" He was like, "You might wanna look into that." I was like, "Oh, okay." And it was, like, the first time that someone had even noticed or, because I have always overcompensated for things that I have felt that I am, fall short in. And, extra studying, extra time doing homework, extra time on. I hated taking tests because I'm a terrible test taker. And it was one of those like, oh, oh, I'm so glad I'm in my junior year of college and somebody finally noticed. Like it was insane to me. So that makes, teaching music difficult sometimes. I have to really prepare before I go in. But
Yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, yeah, like, when you're flipping, like, that completely changes a note, right?
thankfully, the only thing that helps me is my my ear because I can tell that like when something's not in the chord or if I really know that I have to really know the song well. Because if I'm sight reading, I can sight read really well, but like there are notes where I'm like, nope, that's a C. Nope, that's an A. And I have to go back. And I have to be super humble and let some of the kids be like, "Miss Kristen, that's not right." And I'm like, "Oh shoot. Thank you."
It's so for me at least, learning that I was dyslexic was the best gift that I could have been given because to your point of, like, literally working twice as hard as everybody else around me and not having a reason for like, I know I'm not, like, dumb, right?
Yes.
Like, I know I'm
Oh
not,
yeah.
like, actually intellectually
Yeah.
less than, but also nobody can tell me why I have to do this. So, at some point, you kind of get boiled down to, like, I guess I'm just not as smart and I do have to work
Oh
twice as
yes.
hard.
Yep.
Like, there's no other answer, right?
Yep. And I think growing up with an older brother who was also dyslexic and ADHD, I watched him struggle through it, and I was like, it was different enough to the point where I was like, okay, I know he's getting the help that he needs, and I'm really happy about that. But I had to go through my own grieving process of like, how much further could I have learned or could I have gone? And I know that we can't change, and our life, you know, path is exactly the way it's supposed to go, but I had to go through a very, profound grieving experience of like, I am now in my 30s. I'm done with school, and school would have been so much, I won't say easier, but it would have been so much more manageable. And I wouldn't have been so like hard on myself and felt so inadequate if I had been given the tools, or even like, hey, this is going to be harder for you and that's okay. Like it's okay that you're going to struggle in this, because there's so much profound, inadequacy when you're looking at your friends who are like, taking tests in 10 minutes and you're like, I'm still on the first page. Like, what is happening here? So,
Exactly, and all the confidence you see these confident kiddos, but then also at the same point, like, there's so much inadequacy internally that they're fighting against, and they look confident, and so you're like, "I think that they're okay. I think that they're fine," and then internally and when you get to 30 years old, all of those, 12 to 15-year-old years of not feeling good enough and trying to do all these other things to make yourself good enough, it plays out in the work world in such a different way,
yep.
and for leaders, I tell them, I'm like, "If you know that this person, like, has this great idea and they don't have the confidence," for me, that's one of those telltale signs of there's a different brain there, and they've grown up in a world that wasn't built for them, and now they're trying to figure out how to use their gifts in a way that's safe, but it doesn't feel safe because we've
No.
grown up thinking that we were broken, and I love to highlight this, Kristen, because it's so, so important. I work with people all the time, they're like, "How do I tell my child or how do I say that I'm dyslexic?" And I'm like, literally just giving the vocabulary of saying my brain is
Absolutely.
different, it's life-changing,
Yep.
right? It is so important that we at least know that our brains are different, even if you can't afford specialized tutoring supports, like I'm guessing your brother probably got, that are really expensive, and I understand that not everyone has that access to that, but simply explaining how their brain is different is so powerful,
Yeah.
and celebrating those gifts, right? Like, I mean, I'm just, like, listening to you talk and picturing what you do. You are so amazing at what you do because of your differently wired brain.
And I think there's also like, as we are learning about these tools and, bettering ourselves in the name of our different brains. I think I'll get this comment on my social media all the time of like, why do you need the label, or like, why is it important, like, why do you do this? And I'll get, the stupid trolling comments saying, it you always, these millennials are always labeling themselves, like, why do you need the label? And I'm like, okay, the reason we need the label, and this is why I have started creating, and it's why I talk about it, is because there was a profound shift in the way that I did things, talk to people, structure my daily life, when I actually realized that like my brain is actually, created differently, and it doesn't function the way that everybody else's does. And it was so comforting to finally be like, okay, I'm getting so frustrated in this moment. There is a reason why I cannot do this simple task the way that my husband can, the way that, somebody else can. And it's not because I am inadequate, it's because I am different. And that was such a huge light bulb for me of like, going through life always feeling just a little bit, just a little bit behind, or like just not good enough, or never being able to fully reach my potential, like it just felt like the missing key. And in my existence of just, it's okay, you are different, and the world isn't set up for our brains. It just isn't, unfortunately. It's starting to. We're starting to see more of it, but
Yeah. And to some extent, I think the labels help, right? Like, at least it gives us a vocabulary to say how our brains are different. Like, at least we have a word to describe it that's quick and easy, and you kind of maybe hopefully people get it. Um, yeah, and I think you touched on such a profound piece of when I heard this, it just totally made sense. The simple things are so incredibly difficult for us, and the really complicated problems that would take somebody else just I feel like months or years to figure out, we can see the answer so clearly so many times. And so and I don't blame people for getting frustrated thinking like, "Okay, you just solved this, like, crazy hard problem, Nancy, but you can't write your name correctly in an email." Yep, that's literally the c and do I show up to a meeting on time and with the right pad of paper and pen? No. No, I don't. Right, and it doesn't make sense to us.
Absolutely not. No, and I always say that it is so strange to be so calm and like know exactly what to do in like an emergency or in chaotic situations. Like I feel like I thrive when things are absolutely nuts and when things are peaceful and all I have to do is do the dishes and I'm staring at the dishes like this is Mount Everest. You know, I did something incredibly difficult and it took me like half the time of someone who doesn't have my gifting, but like the dishes, I'm like, why is this Mount Everest to me? Like this is going to take and I catastrophize. You know, I catastrophize the simple things and I'm like, this is gonna take me all day. I can't do it. And I like spiraled. My husband's like, just put it in the dishwasher. I'm like, I can't do it.
I see this in companies all the time too. I'm like,
Mhm.
it's not about knowing what to do. We know we have to do the dishes.
Oh, that's the problem. It's an abundance of knowing
Yeah, and 0 doing.
and 0 executing. Mhm.
It is not about like, "Hmm, I wonder what I should do today." No, we know, but it's like a concrete wall between knowing and executing, and it's invisible, and we get it. Like, we get that that shouldn't be like that too. I think that that's, like, the hard part, and people think that we're just procrastinating, which, I mean, I don't disagree that sometimes we do procrastinate, but it's not an intentional procrastination.
No. I always say, like, you don't think I would love to just, be I watch it was so funny. I watched my husband the other day in amazement of just because he's neurotypical, and I watched as he, like, went into the kitchen and, like, did the dishes and then, like, went to another task and didn't need, like, any type of dopamine to, like, get him to do something, and I was like, "This is magical." You live every single day with that amount of, like, executive functioning. Like, how is that possible? The amount of things that I feel like I could conquer if I had just, like, a little bit more executive functioning, like, just a little bit.
Oh, that's the exact same my husband started bringing home work in the evenings, like, once the kids go to bed, he kind of goes down in his office and does, like, more work, and I look at him, like, flipping papers over and getting through his pile and literally using a to-do list and checking things off. I I go down, I just sneak down, and I'm like, "This is amazing." Like, to your point, I wonder what I could accomplish if I had that amount of, like, focus, and he doesn't get up, he doesn't get a cup of coffee, he doesn't, like, go to the bathroom 3 times or get more water or check on the kids. It's it's so unreal to me. Like, it's literally like like, as if he probably watches me trying to do the dishes and fold laundry. Like, all at once, and he's like, "Why is the vacuum cleaner out and the kitchen cabinets are open and
Yep.
half the dishes are put away? Like, Nancy." I'm like, "Well,
Mhm.
I saw this, and then I saw
Yep.
that, and then I remembered about that." And, yeah, I mean, it is I think something we don't talk about probably enough is being married to ADHD is a whole separate beast in so
Mhm.
many ways, and I think especially but, I mean, for moms, it's super, super challenging.
Mhm.
Where I find it really heartbreaking is for dads sometimes
Mhm.
too, is like I've had dads tell me like, "I want nothing more than to get my daughter to ballet class on time," and I can't like, I
Feel
I
that.
can't do it. Yeah,
Mhm.
and it's like and I think so many times it gets translated to like, I care about work more
Yep.
or
Yep.
something else, and it's not that, but especially for moms, I mean, getting kids out the door and to the bus or to school on time it's challenging for anybody.
It's monumental. I don't know. And I get up every day going, today is going to be different. Not going to be running out the door. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And, and then of course, because I'm overstimulated in the process and I get overwhelmed and stressed, and then I'm like yelling at my kids and I don't want to yell at my kids, and then everybody's dysregulated and we're all, taking 5 in the car, like, okay, is everybody good? Are we okay?
For kids, I guarantee, like, their mind goes blank on whatever just happened at, like, 8:05 in the
Yeah.
morning, but for us, like, from 8:05 to 3:30, it literally is just the replay of how awful of a parent I am, and I literally, for years and years when I was in corporate, I had a rag that was in my glove box, and I kept it every morning because I would, like, cry most mornings to work, and so I'd, like, try to, like, keep my mascara, like, or, like, blot underneath. And I feel like, again, like, we just have to talk about it, like,
Yeah.
this is hard this is hard stuff,
Yeah.
and our kids are doing the best they can, we're doing the best we can, but very few of us, if any, have it together like we think we do.
I think that in itself was one of the main reasons why I went to a therapist in the beginning of my diagnosis in the first place, was because I just felt like I sucked at being an adult. And I was like, I don't understand why I can thrive. I can learn all of these foreign language songs for an opera and sing on a stage in front of all of these people. And then I can't function in this season of life. And I wanted this season of life so badly. But now that I'm in it, like I can't see functioning properly. Like that was so disheartening to me until someone was like, okay, you're getting overstimulated, you're getting overwhelmed, you have, paralysis, you have decision fatigue, like, and just went through all of these things. This is why this isn't working. This is what you need to do instead. Take a minute, find regulation. I was like, oh, so I'm not a bad mom. And that was the light bulb for me. It was like sitting back and going, my brain functions differently. Motherhood is very hard for my type of brain. I mean, it's hard for literally any mother on the planet, any parent ever. But the way that we cope with the stressors of motherhood is what is broken. And that's what we need to figure out for ourselves.
So one thing that I see consistently, and I love that you talk about, is going through burnout and
Ooh.
really yeah, I know.
Right now.
Right. I love that you share about it and you're very vulnerable about it. Um, can you maybe, like, just for our listeners, kind of describe what burnout looked like for you and kind of how you put those pieces together?
Whew. Burnout feels, the best way that I can describe it is it feels heavy. And I have, you know, a lot of times therapists will talk about ADHD having the comorbidity of anxiety or depression. And burnout feels to me like a combination of both anxiety and depression. And it just feels like you're just stuck and you're in slow motion. And it's very hard to, accomplish things. It's very hard for our brains when you're not burnt out to accomplish things. But I feel like there is a certain level of just like almost like giving up is what it feels like. It just feels like I can't change anything. I can't do anything. And I just kind of feel stuck. And every day is just like, it's like walking with boots that are really heavy. I don't know. I saw this picture in my head of like, walking through quicksand or something like that. And it just feels like anytime you make any type of like progress, holy moly, you just get, sucked back down. And it can be very hard for someone who already struggles feeling inadequate and fear of failure and all of those things, because you just kind of feel like I'm stuck and I can't do daily life, and the things that I wasn't the best at, now I can't even do. So it just feels like you're just, it just feels like you're stuck. And I think that that's normal, like normal in different seasons of life, especially when you have profound grief or you have loss or any type of emotional things that you're going through, processing trauma, processing, things in life that can very much make burnout so much worse because you're trying to process all of these emotions and you just kind of feel like I'm carrying all of these things and I don't know how to put it down and I just keep carrying it and I keep going around in my daily life and everything looks fine and everybody thinks I'm fine and I'm doing great and yes, I'm fine. And then you're like, there's no gas. There's no gas in the tank. Is like the best way that I could describe it.
Do you have any recommendations for people, like a couple things that
Mhm.
you found that help you through that time?
I think stopping is like the best thing that I can say is, and it's going to feel very counterintuitive to a brain that's like, go, 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 go. And I am a very, um, sometimes I overfill my plate because I feel like my brain functions better when I'm overcommitted. But I think being overcommitted then leads to burnout because then you go, 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 go. And then all of a sudden you're like, I am not running on anything. And then all of a sudden you realize you're just running in the middle of the air and then you fall. It's just because you're so used to that adrenaline being a source of dopamine that when it bottoms out, you're like, oh, I have no dopamine. So I think finding things, the biggest thing that I try to do in a season of burnout is I go back to being very simple. Everything needs to be simple. Don't feel bad if you're picking up food. Don't feel bad if the dishes lay in the sink for one more night. Asking for help. I think this is the biggest thing and that everyone struggles with is asking for help. I am horrible at it. I'm getting better, but I'm horrible at it. It's what you have capacity for. And I read, or I think I listened to a podcast with Brene Brown, and I forget who she was talking to. But she was talking about in her marriage, they come home from the day and they talk about like they use percentages of like I'm at a 20 today. What are you at? Like out of 100. He's like, well, I'm at a 70, so I will do the cooking and the blah 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 blah. And you have to find those people in life that are willing to say, I see you're 20 and I will come do your dishes, you know, and know that like you're going to reciprocate when you're at an 80, when you have a little bit more, you can. I think that's why community is so important and the ability to say, hey, I see you and I understand what you're going through. And I'm in a place right now where I just need help. And I just need you to see me and I need you to sit with me. I need you to body double with me. I need you to, just come talk to me. And that has been a huge benefit to me of just being like, okay, this is really embarrassing. I'm getting over the embarrassment because there's nothing to be embarrassed about. Like everybody struggles and the ability to be vulnerable and humble with yourself and be like, I am not the perfect person. I am not the perfect mother. And I am struggling in this season. And I would really love if someone could come beside me and help me through this season. Also, um, finding this sounds so simple, but for my brain, I need simple, but finding one thing a day that brings you joy and like rediscovering, because a lot of times because of masking and because, growing up the way that we've grown up, like you don't know what actually brings you joy anymore. And like you have to go through and discover like I love a really like nice cup of coffee in my chair and, watching a show, my comfort show over and over and over. I like going for a walk and feeling the breeze. It's like very simple, simple stuff. If you are going to therapy, the fact that you're going to therapy is awesome. Get your favorite drink on the way. It's like those little tiny things that are, I think I heard someone on TikTok call them glimmers. And whoever you are, I thank you for that. And I'm sorry I don't remember. But just finding those little things throughout the day that are going to just be like, okay, in this moment, I have like the best tasting cup of coffee and I'm just going to sit and I'm going to enjoy it for what it is. And then I'm going to move on. That's all.
Absolutely. I think you're like, our kind of burnout techniques are similar. It's interesting because I've been at points in my career where I didn't know how burnt out I was until you start to, like, peel back and slow down, and then you're like, "Oh, this slowdown isn't even slow enough." And then you have to take another step back, and you're like, "This isn't comfortable," because most of us are high achieving, overworking people, and yeah, we're terrible. And to the same extent, we're really terrible at taking other people's help, right? Like, because we've powered through, So, like, somebody's even offering to do my dishes, and I'm like, "No, no, no, I got it. There's no reason that I can't power through." But my gosh, if somebody's offering to help, like, please take it. Yeah, yeah, and, like, let's not forget, it feels good for them to help. Like, we don't talk about that either. It feels so good to help somebody else when you know that that's, like, just 10 minutes out of their day that they don't have to do something. So, like, it's kind of selfish to help as well. So I trick my brain into thinking that, like, you know what? Like, talking to a friend and having her help me process what I'm going through is equally as satisfying for her as it
Absolutely.
helps me.
Absolutely.
And so it doesn't feel like taking as much, I think.
No. My husband's parents live in Michigan, but they come and stay with us often. And my father in law is really good at dishes. And he finds it cathartic and relaxing. And every time when they come and stay, like my house is clean and my dishes are done. And I'm like, this is magic. But like the first couple times I felt I felt so like guilty about it. Like, you are a guest in my house. I love serving people and I love having people in my home and I love being hospitable. So when like they would come and they would do all these things for me as a way of loving us, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. You're doing so much. Like, please stop. Go sit down. I'll do it. I'll do it." And he's like, "Kristen, I love doing this." I'm like, "Okay, I'm gonna walk away." And it's instead of being like, "I'm so sorry," instead of feeling guilty, just learning to say thank you and learning to acknowledge, "Oh my gosh, my entire kitchen is clean. I could cry. Thank you so much. I can now do literally everything else on my to-do list because that was just taking up my entire mental capacity right now." So it's just like changing the mental game of I should have and into thank you for helping.
Absolutely. The one I always challenge people when I'm coaching, when if you say "should," like, we
Don't
just
should
need to double
yourself.
check that.
Yeah.
Right?
My
Don't should
sister-in-law
yourself. Yeah.
always says, she always says, "Kristen, don't should yourself." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, that's true. Okay."
Like, anytime I hear that word now, I'm like,
Mhm,
"Oh, wait, hold on. Like, we need
mhm.
to check that."
Absolutely.
But what advice do you give to, I would say, specifically women who have been maybe diagnosed with anxiety, but hearing your story, they're like, "Hmm, maybe there's more." Like, is there any type of advice or kind of, I don't know, thoughts that you would send their way?
I I accepted the diagnosis of anxiety when, I was given it, but I always felt like there was a piece missing. And I feel with a lot of women who are late diagnosed, anxiety is one of a big thing that's, I always say this is gonna date me a little bit, but when you talk about, the cartoon Scooby-Doo, um, when they take the masks off, my favorite little thing to think about was, like, when the ones that they had 2 masks, and, like, the first mask, they're like, "It's blah, 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 blah," and it's actually and they're like, "It's anxiety," and you're like, "Oh, wait, no, it's ADHD," and it's they take off the final mask, and it's like, that's the culprit, and you've been thinking that it's anxiety this whole time, but I think it's the way that our brains cope with the stressors of life. They're Anxiety does have lots of similar overlap, but I think it's more in the roots and it's how you are coping, how you are dealing with things on a daily basis. If you feel like for me, they gave me anxiety medicine and I hated it. I hated it. I hated the way I felt. It did not help. It made me feel like I was like not in my body. I felt like I was just like floating, like it's just awful, awful. So if like anxiety medicine isn't helping, you feel like there's different parts of your brain that you're not being able to work through, and you still feel like there's something different, finding a therapist, finding a psychiatrist, all of that thing, and just kind of talking through, hey, this isn't working. And I feel like I need more help and I'm not functioning in my everyday life to the fullest of my ability is like a really good place to start.
So well said. I think when all the pieces don't feel like they're fitting, that's kind of that number one, like, and not to say that you don't have anxiety,
Oh,
but
absolutely.
there might be something deeper rooted. And it does make sense the way you're describing it again. Of your brain is literally wired differently, right? It literally works differently, and then it comes out as anxiety because we don't know, and it's awkward and weird, and it doesn't fit in the boxes,
Yes.
but that's not the root. The root could be that your brain is simply wired differently, and we've never discovered it, and so discovering that, it just answers so many questions, and it is messy. I think it's okay for it to be messy of where does anxiety end and ADHD begin,
Mm.
and is there, other co-conditions that are
Mhm.
factoring in because
Absolutely.
one neurodivergent brain is completely different from any other neurodivergent brain, and that's a beautiful part about it, but it's hard because we don't none of us fit in a box, nor should we, right? Like, this world would be so boring if we all fit into a box.
Absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much. I will put all the show notes in as far as where, people can find you, but just tell us real quick, where should they find you if they wanna follow you?
Um, I'm on Instagram, TikTok, and recently Facebook because they Meta, put the two together. So
Perfect. Mindfully Mended Mama. I
I know.
always have to look at my notes when I'm saying. Well, thank you so much,
Thank you
Kristen.
so
I
much.
truly appreciate it. It's been such a joy to talk with you today. Thanks for listening. If you like this episode, I would love it if you would consider subscribing. It is literally the best way you can support our work here. And if you're feeling extra generous, take a screenshot and tag us on social with one of your takeaways from the episode. Until next time, friends, embrace that unique brain you've been given.